I am so excited that you're joining us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in our country. Really looking forward to having this conversation. As I mentioned off the top, my name is Zane Belgi. I am the campaign director for Vote Housing. I might be a familiar face to some of you if you've seen me in and around the Recovery for All circles over the past year, as we've worked with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness on the Recovery for All campaign. And today we'd love to talk to you about our new campaign called Vote Housing. You see the vibrant colors in front of you. We'll talk to you about the colors, the campaign, all that fun stuff today. And thank you for making time as we talk about this ambitious new project that we are all undertaking as a collective, and you'll hear about that collective in a second as well. Before I get going, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping items, and then I'll introduce some of the other panelists that we have on the call today. On the housekeeping side, if you would like this webinar in French, if you click on that little globe icon in your Zoom box, you should be able to translate between English and French. And as it relates to the slides on the screen, my campaign colleague Steph here will drop a link for the French version of this slide deck. So you have that should you want to follow along, not in English, but in French. And then finally, I will add on the housekeeping side, please feel free to throw in your questions in the Q&A. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We want to take questions. We've got time for questions at the end. We want to hear from you, and we'd love to, be able to take those questions as we near the end. But feel free to insert them in whenever you get a moment. Let me introduce a few of the folks that you'll also be hearing from today on this call. First, I'd like to introduce Stefania Seicha, who's from the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. She's also going to be one of our deputy directors for this campaign. You'll be hearing from her in a moment. Also, Dallas Alderson from the Co-op Housing Federation, also another deputy director on the campaign. We also have Cheyenne Rutnam, who's joining us from the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network and is on the council for this campaign alongside Alex Nelson. They are also part of the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network and are going to be spearheading a lot of the strategy and a lot of the big ticket sort of direction that this campaign goes in as well. And finally, last but certainly not least, Steve Sutherland from the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association Indigenous Caucus. Steve's going to be helping us on the field side of our campaign as one of our deputy leads on field, and you'll hear from Steve later on in this presentation. So without further ado, what I will do is be quiet and hand over the floor to Alex to give some opening remarks and just set the stage for this campaign. So Alex, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Zane, for that really nice introduction. So as Zane said, my name is Alex Nelson. I use they, them pronouns. And before we get going, I just want to say I am zooming in from London, Ontario, and I know as an online webinar and an online space, we're all zooming in from different regions of Canada. But I want to say that I personally am currently located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Attawandaron, and Lenape peoples. And I say this in recognition of the fact that we are all embedded in a framework of colonization and the ongoing dislocation and dispossession of land, language, and culture of Indigenous peoples. And I want to hold space for that recognition because for so many, homelessness is a direct result of those dynamics. And as Vote Housing, we are committed to uplifting and advancing movements towards reconciliation. So thank you. So could we go to the next slide, please?
Oh, you're on mute there, Alex.
So sorry. How much have I been muted for? The whole thing? Okay. So sorry. Wow. Tech issues, and the Zoom world. So again, the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network is thrilled to be part of this campaign. This is not just a great opportunity for people with lived experience of homelessness, but also engaging people with lived experience of homelessness is a fundamental aspect of realizing the right to housing in Canada, meaning we need to be mobilizing those who are most impacted by housing issues, housing insecurity, and homelessness. So our role as CLELIN is to support, advise, and to lead the campaign as equal partners. And this is really exciting. The Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network is an allied network of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. And we seek to advance the leadership of people with lived experience of homelessness across the housing sector, but more broadly in policy work. As it relates to housing and homelessness. And this campaign is just one of the initiatives that our steering committee members are engaged in. And this really is the future of housing work. The meaningful engagement of people with lived experience of homelessness means recognizing us as people with lived experience of homelessness as leaders and as necessary change makers in ending homelessness. So much of experiences of homelessness are rooted in social exclusion. And it's often that we are spoken of as though we are not in the room, not at the table, and sometimes as though we're not even part of the public. And this campaign really seeks to change that and turn that on its head, because we are not just the voting public, but we are also the grassroots. And what we know from Recovery for All is that 36% of Canadians have at some point in their lives experienced homelessness or know someone who has. So when we talk about reaching voters where they're at, we're talking about all of those millions of Canadians whose lives have been impacted by homelessness. And as the Canadian Alliance, or Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network rather, we're at the table, we're engaged, and what we want you to know is that you have people who understand your experiences at this table who are spearheading this conversation. And that's really not something that a lot of other political campaigns can make this claim. I think it's a really exciting prospect for the future of work on housing, to know that we have more to offer than just our experiences. We are leaders and we are people with intimate wisdom of what it's like to end homelessness. And so we're really grateful to be at this table and part of this conversation, and we're excited to see where it goes. So today we're going to be talking about the campaign, the brand, our objectives as a campaign, and the phases that we'll be going through over the coming months leading up to the election, that some of the tactics that we're going to be using, and also specifically how you can help as members of the voting public and also as representatives from organizations who have a vested interest in conversations around housing. So the campaign, this is the juicy part. So here is kind of the high level overview of what we're up to. Vote Housing is a national nonpartisan housing campaign to end homelessness and housing need in Canada. So who are the key players at the table so far? We are supported by the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, us at the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network, and the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. But it's really important to note that we are mobilized by Canadians across the country pledging to vote housing. This really is a grassroots initiative that seeks to pull on the knowledge and wisdom of everyday Canadians. And I think that's something that's really special, and part of the reason why CLELIN is so excited to be part of this conversation, because it recognizes, as I said, that people with lived experience of homelessness and housing needs, something that touches so many Canadians, are part of this conversation. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Steph.
Thank you so much, Alex. And yeah, we'll just Building on what Alex was saying, which was so great and really hits the nail on the head, is that we're looking with Vote Housing to be the largest nonpartisan housing advocacy campaign ever. And that we wish to do by, as sort of Alex was touching on, reflecting our values, our tactics, what we're getting folks to vote for, so that, you know, everyone, all voters see themselves in this campaign as it pertains to, you know, the housing affordability crisis, people experiencing homelessness, housing precarity, and stable housing, just that full spectrum. We really want to get those people onboarded and involved in the campaign. And when it comes to election day, that they vote for the party that best reflects what we're pushing for. And we're not doing this from scratch, although we are a little bit with any new campaign, but we're also building on a bit of the success of the campaigns that all of our collective organizations have done so far. So I'm going to specifically speak to one that the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, my organization, recently sort of wrapped up, and that is the Recovery for All campaign. And hopefully all of you are very familiar with the Recovery for All campaign. Obviously, we had started that recovery, meaning, of course, economic recovery, specifically because we noticed that when everything shut down in March 2020, inequities for folks who have been most disenfranchised and marginalized by society, their inequities became a lot more mainstream knowledge as everything kind of shuttered, and everyone had to adapt and react to everything that changed. So we decided to launch a campaign in May 2020 called Recovery for All, with really the intention to put pressure on the federal government, because obviously any economic recovery plan coming out of the pandemic or in reaction to the pandemic has to include every single person in this country, and particularly with a focus on housing and homelessness. So what was really amazing, we had never done anything like that before. We engaged Zane and his organization to help us do it, because we're a small but mighty team at the CAH, and our goal was just matched, and we exceeded our expectations. So in the end, Recovery for All, starting with CAH and endorsers who came on in the early stages, we in the end had 24,000 supporters, over 120 endorsing organizations. In all, we had, inside of a year we had 37 letter campaigns and 758,000 plus letters sent, which is just a phenomenal amount. And I don't want to know what that inbox was like for our federal counterparts, but that was really just a really big swing for us. For our video views, we had over 1.6 million. And in all, from the stats we were able to collect, we reached 3.9 million Canadians. So as far as the Recovery for All campaign, we're bringing a lot of those learnings into this campaign. But of course, CHF Canada and CHRA have also done an incredible amount of campaigns. So I'm going to hand it off to my co-deputy, Dallas, to speak more to the success of those campaigns.
Sure. Thanks so much, Steph. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So, you know, we've been super impressed and awe of some of the work that's gone on through Recovery for All that Steph just spoke to. So we're really pleased to be working with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness on this campaign, as well as, of course, the two other organizations. On the CHF Canada side, housing cooperatives have a long history of impressive grassroots advocacy, and that's a lot of what we'll be bringing to the campaign. During past federal elections, we've organized a number of events at housing cooperatives, invited candidates out to those events, you know, all the really fun stuff, barbecues and you know, town hall type pieces, but it allowed us, you know, after that government was elected, to have established relationships with candidates, which was huge. And we really did that working directly with our member cooperatives. So we have a lot of experience doing those kind of federal election engagement pieces, but then also on kind of issue-based campaigns. We've done a number of pieces leveraging our very active and engaged memberships needing to secure rental assistance for low-income households when some of those earlier programs were set to expire, and have done so successfully using a variety of techniques, but really leveraging our very dedicated and engaged membership. So we'll bring a lot of that experience and excitement and dedication from the co-op sector to this campaign. And with that, I think Steve is going to share with you a little bit about some of the success that CHRA has had over the course of their different advocacy endeavors.
Thanks, Dallas, and thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for having me. Yeah, a lot of our CHRA's most recent advocacy has been around the urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy. In late April, following the budget, we held our first ever housing debate with all the housing critics of all of the parties. So we bring a lot of experience on that side of working with the federal government, but also with our members on different advocacy pieces, Rapid Housing Initiative. But most importantly, we're really excited to work with all the partners on this. We have such a wide range of experiences and expertise. So I think together we'll have a really strong campaign. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the next slide, and I'll take us through some of the campaign objectives. So at a high level, we're really looking to combine the skills and experiences of our 4 organizations that have had a lot of success with both grassroots work and also digital advocacy, really with the goal of creating the largest nonprofit housing sector campaign ever built. Of course, this campaign is going to be nonpartisan. We're going to be engaging all sorts of organizations and individuals trying to influence all the federal parties so that whatever the next federal government looks like, whatever color flag they fly, they will be required almost because of the heft of our campaign to incorporate our asks, our needs into their agenda in a big way. And in terms of how we want to work with other organizations, I mean, there's so many organizations and individuals doing work in this space. And so we want to make sure we create opportunities for unique partnerships with the variety of organizations already committed to housing, to homelessness, so that we can have the largest reach possible. So we're really here, and you'll hear a little bit more later on in the presentation about opportunities to work with the campaign. And as a principle behind that, it's really about what could work for you so that we can expand our reach and have a bigger collective impact. So next slide, please. Okay, so how are we going to do this? What will this look like in real life? So we will identify 70 approximately ridings that are sort of those considered swing ridings, competitive, where we know parties will be paying a special attention. There's 338, so we can't sort of spread ourselves too thin. So we really will try and focus on those where there's going to be a lot of attention. Also, some ridings that may not fall into that swing riding status as strongly, but where housing need and homelessness really is very resonant. So that will also be a factor. Maybe just a small mention here too. If you're sitting in a location where you're not too sure that you're in much of a spring riding, but you're interested in participating in the campaign, there'll be lots of opportunities to also do work in other areas. So it's not sort of you're in, you're out sort of thing, but all to say, we will try and have some kind of focus to make our efforts as effective as possible. We're going to do everything we can to demonstrate that we have a lot of individuals and organizations behind us and that our case is strong. We want to have a large national coalition building on the supporters and the memberships of our 4 organizations, but much, much bigger than that. Individuals and organizations that haven't necessarily participated in this space, but for whom our message is very resonant. what we're going to be asking people and organizations to do is to pledge to vote housing. So when you go to the polls, whenever the federal election is called, you're going to be casting your ballot for a candidate that you think will best meet the demands of this campaign, really voting with housing top of mind. We're going to be mobilizing to get out that vote. So as we get closer to election day, you'll see increased communications from us, really encouraging what we think will be a very large coalition of vote housing endorsers to do exactly that, to cast their vote with housing in mind. Next slide, please. Yes, our brand. So you can just flip to the next one. What we've tried to do here, and it's an interesting process working across 4 national organizations whom individually have their own sort of brand and messaging and logos and all of that. And we really decided, I think, quite early on to try and develop something that was simple and values-based and really doesn't look and feel like any of our individual organizations, making it clear that this is something new, collaborative, that we are all on board together. So Vote Housing, of course, is the name of the campaign. You'll see some of our branding there in t-shirt form. And yes, there will be t-shirts, probably some lawn signs and stickers and buttons and other fun things too. But chose the colors and the branding to be really vibrant and optimistic and have this be a really forward-looking and bold campaign that is, as I said, really about the collective vision that we and all of our endorsers and partners will bring to the campaign. Next slide, please. And there's our logo, purple and pink. We love it. We hope that you do too. And I think with that, I can turn it over to Steve, if that's correct.
Oh, it's up to me, but that's okay. Our
staff,
names
I'm
are very
sorry.
similar. That's okay. Yeah, so we are looking at a 3-phase process essentially for vote housing. So taking that purple and pink and what we're doing with it over the next few months. So yeah, just the next slide there. Just so you can kind of visually see what I'm about to say to keep me in check. But basically right now we're working at what Zane likes to call and has taught me to call the campaign in a can. So between now and launch day is going to be June 17th, we are building all the pieces, getting the website ready. We are building out our large campaign team. So right now we have those 4 partners at the table. And right now we're in a process to get as many endorsers to join the group as possible. And as we've built up those materials, we'll be sharing it just with folks who have already initially signed on and are going to help us. And then once June 17th comes around, it's going to go from 0 to 100 publicly. So all of a sudden, with endorsers and partners and folks across the country in tow with us, June 17th will be kind of all of us collectively getting on our rooftops, on the sidewalks, everywhere we possibly can virtually, and shouting it from the rooftops, vote housing, what it is, and building that excitement and getting it forward, using all the communications that we have at that point that will be mostly digital, and building teams across Canada to help us mobilize voters and mobilize supporters to access them and get the messaging out. So phase 2, that leads us, June 17th is the beginning of that. And that's basically, like I was saying, getting endorsers to join in, getting supporters to join in, building that excitement, getting tools out there, any trainings, so that when the writ drops, and we don't have that date, we do have a very good sense, expectations are high that it is going to be before the end of this year, perhaps in October or November, the actual election day. But the 2 months before that, where the election campaigning actually begins, we want to have boots on the ground as well, starting our own sort of nonpartisan version of that, where we're much more vote housing, value-based, accessing voters, so that on election day, voters know what to look for. They in what their candidates are saying when it comes to housing and homelessness and the solutions that we need to get out of the crisis that we're in. Yeah, so that's the 3 phases for success that we're planning on right now. And I am going to pass it off to Stephen, who is going to go into the tactics.
Thanks, Steph. So I'm actually really excited to speak about tactics because this is like where my inner campaign geek kind of comes out. Like this is absolutely my favorite part of doing any type of campaigning. So Zane, if you want to jump into the next slide. Cool, thanks. So focusing twofold in the Vote Housing campaign. So first, we're going to focus a bit on the digital tactics. And our digital tactics will allow us to reach and connect with people across the country and bring them into the campaign. We're here to support pretty much everybody who signs up. We're here to support you. And particularly when it comes to the digital piece, this is about engaging and activating your friends, your family, and anybody else on your social media networks, even those people, you know, that you haven't spoke to in 10, 15 years that are just like old high school friends. We want you to engage them too. We need to engage everybody as much and as often as we possibly can. This is going to be the key to the success of the entirety of the campaign, and that's people power. Digital will then be combined with grassroots. So the intent here is to really do what a political campaign does. And we want to ensure that we embrace those types of tactics in our campaign, as you can see what's listed next to the grassroots part on the slide there. This will lead to more people getting out the vote and ensuring that Vote Housing can play a critical role in determining those previously mentioned targeted swing ridings, but even just ridings across the country. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zane.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. I'll jump into this final section around how you can help, as we've kind of teased every element of this campaign thus far. But before I do that, perhaps what I'll do is throw it over to Dallas again, just to quickly speak about one of the items that you may not have heard of just yet, which is what the campaign's going to be talking about. And of course, the campaign's going to be talking about things in 2 different streams, I would say. The day-to-day of what the campaign will communicate to supporters, to Canadians, are going to be pretty much values-based and high level, right? We want to try to have as many people see themselves in this campaign as possible, which is why we've created this campaign with such a simple, easy to understand, hopefully vibrant brand that is empowering, that allows people to say, yeah, you know, I agree notionally and values-based with what's going on. And we'll try to keep a communication stream going on with the, knock on wood, tens of thousands of people that join this campaign. But there's also another part of what is this campaign going to talk about, and that's the issues. What are the things that we care about? So maybe I'll turn it over to Dallas to give you a verbal sense of some of the top line, what you'd call policies or issues that would kind of make up the Vote Housing platform, as those are still being crystallized, and as those kind of take a greater shape, will of course be on our website and will be certainly distributed. But Dallas, in the meantime, could maybe kind of give folks a high level in terms of some of the areas that we are thinking to target from an issues or platform perspective.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to do that, Zane. So we've toned in on six key areas, 6 key asks in the Ottawa Speak. The first one is implementing an urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy, along with dedicated investments for Indigenous housing. So this is something that's really been missing to date within the existing national housing strategy. And we know that Indigenous people disproportionately experience housing need and homelessness. So this is a top line piece for us within our policy asks. Second piece, we want the federal government to commit to the prevention and elimination of homelessness. Obviously a key piece. Third policy ask, we want the federal government to invest in the construction and acquisition of at least 50,000 units of, construction and operation of at least 50,000 units of supportive housing. So this is really a key aspect of how that homelessness prevention and elimination piece can be achieved. So we want to be clear about the supportive housing policy ask. And so the fourth one is investing in the building and acquisition of deeply affordable non-market housing, which of course should include both co-op housing and nonprofit housing. So this is really also a key piece around eliminating that housing need and preventing homelessness. So we want to be really clear about that policy ask. Our fifth one, we want to see the right to housing as something that is progressively realized, and one that addresses the unique needs of equity-seeking communities, making sure that people with lived experience of housing need and homelessness are engaged in all aspects of what the federal government does as part of the implementation of our 6-point policy plan. It is a really, really central piece to making sure, even if the dollars are in place, which we hope they are, but that those work, those are delivered in a way that makes sense and realizes their goals. The 6th policy piece is around expanding rental assistance for low-income households. This is really, the counterpoint to building new nonprofit and co-op housing. We also need to make sure that low-income households can receive direct rental assistance where that's the most appropriate way to eliminate their housing need. So these are the 6 policy asks at this point. As Zain said, they're not 100% crystallized. We're working with kind of a variety of folks and voices to make sure that they're as inclusive as possible of what the sector broadly feels is needed in order to meet the goal of ending and preventing homelessness and housing need. But we think we're really close, and are intentionally kind of trying to secure a balance between being precise about what's needed, but not being too detailed, not being too prescriptive, so that others don't see themselves in the plan. So that's where we are, but as it is crystallized, it will be included in our communications and on our website, of course.
Awesome, thank you, Dallas. And we'll make sure we send that out as well as soon as we have that solidified. To Dallas's point, let me go into the how to help section, and let me start here, which is, this is a slide that I use quite often in presentations, and I think it's so fitting in this particular context of the Vote Housing campaign. This is a quote by FDR, American president in the 1930s, and he ultimately was talking to a group in this particular context in which he agreed with exactly what they were asking for. He said, what you want, I agree with. I agree with it notionally. I agree from a policy perspective. I agree with it from a larger societal context and construct, but I want you to make me do it. And what he meant by that was that you need to be able to show me that it is not just you and your organization, who I have a ton of respect for, just asking for me to do this, that there's a coalition of folks behind you, in that case, Americans behind you, wanting to make this change also happen. Because at the end of the day, while this was a sitting US president, any political party has perhaps puts the most amount of their resources, one might argue, and probably incorrectly in many ways, but puts a lot of their resources engaging the appetite for certain change by the public, right? Is this just you and your special interests asking me to do this, or do you have a coalition of people who want to do this? So this quote I use as almost a starting off point or a thesis statement for why we do what we do and for why we're constructing the Vote Housing campaign the way we are, which is, while many things have changed since the 1930s, this remains a reality today, which is that in order for us to get change, yeah, we might get lucky in certain contexts, or we might have a real forthright political party or politician just saying, we got to do it. I'm willing to spend all political capital. Who cares what it takes? Who cares how popular it is? But more so, knowing that we need to appeal to a wide swath of political parties, and that many political parties, if not all, want to know what the coalition behind a movement is, well, let's give them that coalition. That's what Vote Housing is here to do. For many of us on this call, we know this is the right thing to do. We know it's long overdue. We know that politics created the construct and the problem, but what we are trying to do is to say, it's great for us to know it. Can we now expand to the circle around us to know it? And with the blessing of time and the runway of time, can we help them expand to the circle around them to know it? And if we have that built prior to an election, then what we're working with is what I'd call campaign firepower, which is not just a sector run campaign, but 2 or 3 rings beyond us, also engaged and ready to mobilize and talk to their friends and family to expand a movement. That's how a political party grows support, right? It's the same way. They have a candidate at a kitchen table saying, okay, how do I do this? Well, they start with their 10 closest friends. Welcome to the club, by the way. You are our closest friends. That's why we're chatting with you right now. And then from there on in, they build the circles around them. So you find us in this pre-launch, incubation stage, having this kitchen table conversation with our closest friends. And what we're going to then try to do is expand this circle continuously so that everyday Canadians see themselves in what we're trying to do in that second, third, and fourth ring. So our coalition is not just bigger than us, it's exponentially bigger than us. That's the hope that we have, that it's tens of thousands of people across this country, some of which have never engaged on housing issues before, ready to put their hand up and say, yeah, you know what, this election, I will pledge to vote housing. I'll ensure that housing is top of mind. It's a question I ask before I mark an X for any political party. And so this quote, it always kind of anchors me in that direction, gives a justification as to why we're doing what we're doing, which kind of brings us to how you can help. Well, there's a ladder that we have that starts with supporters, endorsers, and contributors. And let me start with the first one at the top. As a supporter, which we would tremendously value, it's a very simple ask. When we launch, could you sign up and be part of the campaign? And I'm hoping that for most folks on the call that you're able to do that first step. We'd be grateful for it, no doubt. And it's a pretty simple thing to do. You'd be on our email list, we'll keep you updated. If you've got a bit more capacity, I think that we'd like to hone in on an ask today around endorsers. Could you endorse this campaign? And endorsing this campaign is also as painfully easy, but it has one distinct qualifier, which is we'd love for you to do it now prior to the campaign launching, which is in the coming days, prior to our launch, and Steph will send a link here shortly in the chat, and we'll also send it in a follow-up email. Could you endorse this campaign? Quite simply, your organization, why you're endorsing, and your logo. And what that would mean is when we launch, we want to launch with not just the 4 partners, but with a tapestry of organizations across this country who also are calling for this change. The stronger we launch, the better our trajectory. So if you're able to help us with that, provide us a logo and say, you know what, this is something I care for, this is something I'm on board with, that will help us significantly, not just as a show of strength, but as a show of credibility and viability, and frankly, setting a trajectory for our movement. The additional ask I'd have is if you're endorsing the campaign, would you agree to, on launch day, helping us send out materials to your membership and your lists that you have within your organization? We know that there are, our campaign superpower, Steve mentioned it perfectly, is people. Like, it's not money. This is not a moneyed campaign. It is one another, and it is our networks, and it's our ability to work together and just be a disproportionately assertive and resilient voice in this space. So the way we do that is by having not just ourselves do it, but using that same philosophy I mentioned earlier, using those around us, our membership, our lists, our supporters within each of our own organizations. Could you reach out to them? Well, what we would commit to do is provide you all the graphics, all the copy, everything you need for social media, for an email list, for launch day. We'd put it in a Dropbox and we'd say, take this, run with it, maybe make a few edits to make it in your organization's voice, but could you help us on launch day? Because like I said, that will really help us set our trajectory. So to recap, supporting us, awesome. We'd love that as soon as we launch. Before we go for launch, could you help endorse this campaign? That would mean a ton to us, not just in the sense of gratitude and symbolism, but from the practicality of a show of strength, a show of credibility, and helping us fan out this campaign. So that first day launch isn't just us 4 organizations talking amongst one another. We have you and your organization and your membership. We've got low-hanging fruit, if I can call it that, of people who should be engaged on this on day one, who are engaged on day one. That's what we'd ask on the endorser side. If you've got a bit more capacity and want to take 3 steps on that ladder, so doing the first one, the second one, the third one, we would love for any organization that has the ability to make a financial contribution. We would be more than grateful for that. We would also value any organization that's able to offer in-kind support. So that could include secondment of staff members on your team. I'll talk to you about that in a second in terms of what we're looking for, sharing of email lists, recruitment of volunteers, any in-kind support that you could use from a skills side, or sending us any capacity to build out this campaign team would also be tremendously useful in and or a financial contribution. So 3 steps on that ladder, starting with supporter, which we'd love for when we launch, endorser, if you have the capacity to do so now on behalf of your organization prior to launch, we'd love that. And then contributor taking that 3rd step. As it relates to secondments, what we need now, let me walk you through a couple of distinct areas. Communicators, if you've got folks on your team that can write, that can do social media, that can design, that have not just even a capacity in this, a little bit of it, but even an interest, right? One of the goals that we have for this campaign is not to just find folks in different areas, pull them in and use them and then throw them back to the organization. That's part of it on the secondment side, don't get me wrong. But it's also to say, do you have someone within your organization who's interested in one of these areas? Because what we can also do is have them join the campaign, build a bit of capacity, and as we're out of the campaign, what we then have is organizational capacity for you on the back end as an organization, but also sector capacity. Because if I can speak on behalf of the coalition, which is a dangerous thing to do, of partners, but I'd say that the drumbeat of Vote Housing doesn't end this federal election. It starts this federal election. That this voice and this brand and this coalition is not going to expire on the day of the federal election. It's just going to repurpose itself into a direction that says, okay, someone got elected. What do we need to do now? And so this coalition that we're hoping to grow with your assistance can also help generate capacity development and building. So on that first stream, marketers, writers, content producers. That second stream, people who can help us organize in the field, who are good at community engagement and outreach and partnerships and volunteer management and field organizing, helping us set up, phone call parties, all those sort of things. Anything in that area, if you've got folks that would be interested in finding a spot on the campaign, we've got a spot for them, I will say, on the campaign. And in addition, I mentioned the financial contributions as well. Finally, did someone say volunteer? If you know folks in your network or within your organizations that can volunteer, there's 3 major streams. The first stream, in your community. Folks that want to door knock, phone call, organize street teams, wherever you are in this country. Even if you're a lone island somewhere, we're happy to kind of figure out how we get you involved. Also online, this matters because a lot of us will be, pandemic restrictions included, or might have just be a comfort level, want to organize digitally. We've got roles for folks to organize digitally online. And then finally, can you help us lead? Can you help us be that person in a riding or in a region to say, you know what, I'm happy to organize the volunteers here. I'm happy to organize the shift, of course, with the campaign's help, to get the collateral, to get everything out the door, to get all the kits set up. But I can kind of take on a leadership position on the volunteer side. So those are the 3 streams we're looking for, with varieties of activities and flexibilities in terms of what that could look like. What's next? So we'll look for that secondments and financial contributions if you're able to. The endorsements prior to, I kind of mentioned the importance of that, and we'd be tremendously grateful if you would consider endorsing the campaign prior to our launch. And then we'll launch. We'll hit our website, our video, our pledge. We'll hit June 17th. We hope it's a great trajectory. We hope it can hit and have tens of people, thousands of people in that first month, but hopefully thousands of people in that first day alone join the campaign, which would allow us to really head into what I'd call post-launch month. We head into that mid-June to mid-July, trying to keep growing the endorsement list because it's still very useful post-launch, keep growing the volunteer base because we'll hopefully have more people intent to volunteer, keep growing out our communications and start communicating about the size and the ambition of our movement. So that's what we're looking to do here in a nutshell. I know I spoke quite a bit on the back end, and I know I spoke quite a bit on that FDR piece, but I think it's so important we understand in terms of why we're trying to grow this and expand it beyond all of us as folks within the sector with the passion for this, to everyday Canadians who may not necessarily know yet that they've got a passion for this movement, but find themselves in this movement, so that we've got that people power to then ensure that no political party, or whichever political party gets into power, that these issues are ultimately undeniable. And if the issues are undeniable, we become undeniable, and vice versa. And I think that's the real strength and the ambition that we have, certainly heading to this next federal election. But I'm just so excited for what this brand and this platform can be well beyond that. So I'll leave it there in terms of the formal presentation, and open it up to Q&A and any items we may have in the chat. And maybe what I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen here so I can see everyone, and kind of access the chat function as well. And Steph, I might kind of turn it over to you to see if we've got any comments or anything showing up thus far.
And I, in turn, will pass it over to Cheyenne, who's going to help us
Yes.
with the Q&A part today.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a couple questions, and I think Dallas did answer one of them, and perhaps we could provide some context in terms of that question. And the question is coming from Patrick, who asked, have you considered continuing through upcoming provincial elections as well? Ontario has one in 2022. So I know Dallas has answered, but perhaps provide some more context.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, Patrick. I mean, the answer that I'd like to say is we'd love to. Our focus right now is laser focused on setting up. This is, what's exciting about this is that we're setting it up for the first time, right? So this collaboration of all of us, even the folks you see on the screen, it's the first time we're kind of setting this campaign up. Do we have individual learnings from our respective organizations, as mentioned? Absolutely. But right now, it's kind of setting up campaign in the can, as Steph has mentioned, getting to a point where we can launch on the federal side. Hopefully, if we our predictions are correct, that election happens in this 21 year. Then we've got that first experience as a collective with the endorsing organizations, hopefully with your help, Patrick, and others, to kind of get us to a point where that federal election is something, okay, that's an exercise we went through, that what worked, what didn't work, that we have it then tooled as a platform that can point in different directions. That's how I kind of think of vote housing beyond the federal election. It's kind of surveying the landscape and saying, oh, is it Ontario provincial? Is it maybe we kind of do our own movement in between? Is it, do we look at what the party got into power and what work needs to be done to kind of bridge the promises they may have made into the realities of true funding? So it kind of can look like a sonar detector where it kind of goes around and tries to find where it's most useful as an operation. Now, I'm not making promises, but this is just kind of top of mind in terms of what I'm thinking of. And Steph is probably having a heart attack as I say that. But I feel like that's probably the broadest answer I can give you in terms of the focus on the provincial side, which is we want to get through the federal side first and then be really open to those opportunities on the back end as they present themselves. And, one like Ontario provincial, while having like an actual time box that's going to happen here, might be a very concrete one to look at thereafter.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And we do have a French question, and I'm not French speaking, so perhaps somebody who speaks French can actually read that.
That might be a Dallas question.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So the question is about the policy asks. So where can we find those? Noting that, of course, it's difficult to endorse the campaign without really having a clear sense of the specific pieces that we're asking for. So I can say that the 6 points that I outlined just verbally, they're really close to final, but completely understand that you want to see the list, share it with perhaps your board if that's the kind of organization you're representing in order to seek that endorsement. So we're happy to send to participants on this webinar the policy asks once they're final. I think it's quite, as I say, quite close, but you can expect that by the end of the week or early next week. So, some time prior to the June 17th launch. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Dallas. So the next question is, let's see, I did have it. Can we begin endorsing right away, or is there a specific kickoff date we should be waiting for? I know we spoke a little bit about, start endorsing now, but is there an actual date that people should be waiting for?
So endorse right now if you can. We'd be tremendously grateful. Steph sent that link. We'll send it in a follow-up email in the chat here. That link is there. And then the date you should be looking for is our launch date, June 17th. So we ask if you can submit the stuff now in advance on June 17th. We will send everyone who's endorsed the campaign as an organization prior to the 17th, a couple days before, all the collateral needed for a successful launch. We'll kind of let you know, hey, we're going to go at 9 a.m. Eastern. It'll be out from our side officially. Could you help us amplify it? Could you share that post that's out there? Could you send an email to your list so that we have a successful launch? So that's a much longer answer than you asked for, but endorse right away, and then we'll be in touch the days before the 17th so you can help us with amplifying the campaign on launch day.
At this time, I don't see additional questions, but perhaps we could, oh, there's a question and answer here. Will you be endorsing one political party or individual candidates?
We will not be doing either. This is a nonpartisan campaign. Our focus is to talk about housing issues. So our focus is going to be about two things. Number one, talking about the platform points that we brought up in terms of, why this platform matters. And number two, using the organizations, the campaign's voice, but also the voice of Canadians across the country who've signed up to pledge to vote housing, letting every political party know that they would be wise to ensure housing is part of their platform, that they would be wise to strongly consider our platform and the thousands of people that stand behind us, that parade. Even if they're in that FDR mold of wanting to do it, they know that there's thousands of people behind them that would support that and frankly are looking for that for them in this particular campaign. But we will not be endorsing a particular party. We will not be endorsing candidates. The furthest we might go is to give a sense of where the parties stand on certain things when that is appropriate, but that will not be putting any thumb on the scale. Our focus here is to say, not to say we don't care who forms government, but in many ways, we're not a partisan initiative to try to get one party elected. We are a initiative that's using this first federal election as our platform to ensure, starting now and forevermore, housing issues are not, relegated to the dustbin of if it's popular, we do it. We'll make sure it's popular because we're going to incubate thousands of people into the campaign, and we're going to try to make sure every political party ensures that they have a response to these issues. It's a bold, ambitious play, no doubt, but that's what we're trying to do with this first iteration of the campaign as we launch here.
Definitely, it's more so about capacity building and pushing information out and educating Canadians so that they can make their informed decision based on what the priorities are. And of course, for this campaign, the priority is housing. And our hope is that when we get to election, Canadians will vote based on that priority and choose what is what makes most sense for that topic or theme. I see there's another question, perhaps, Dallas. I'm not sure. Yes. If you can go ahead and answer that in French.
Muted, sorry. No, c'est exactement ça. We won't be doing as, perhaps you've seen other organizations or campaigns do, like with a report card or, this party best meets our demands, or this candidate versus these other candidates in a certain riding best meet our demands. We won't be doing anything like that.
That seems to be the final question, unless there's any straggling questions that we still have. And then I could pass it over back to perhaps Zane or Stefania. Okay, so somebody just said, this campaign sounds fantastic. What a great partnership and strategy. And I love the branding. Very exciting to support your work where possible. Thanks for bringing great energy to this team.
That's great. And right back at you, because honestly, we're really appreciative of everyone taking the time, even just today. As Zane noted, this is a little bit still in the incubation process, while all four of our organizations have done our own campaigns and had success related to them specifically. I think this will be a little bit of a learning process for us too. I personally have never run in a political campaign, although I am a voter, so I know what I'm looking for. And I think we're just taking those learnings and we're taking that energy into this next federal election to kind of challenge those who seek power to pay attention to what voters want, to pay attention to the housing and homelessness crisis happening across our country, and committing to it if they want that power, committing to those solutions that we all know here at this table today need to happen. So yeah, with that, we will be following up in an email with this presentation, the endorsement link, and any other the communications materials we have at this point. And for those of you who do sign up through the endorsement form between now and then, we will be following up with more information, the website, all of that stuff that's in the can.
Steph, do you mind if I jump in? I know you made such a great
Mhm.
close there, and now I'm going to jump in and spoil it. I did want to make one final point to everyone, which was we're also actively seeking and in conversations with a potential Quebec partner as well to make this truly national, pan-Canadian. We know that's important, and we're not going to just try to play lip service to it. I wanted folks to know that that's also as part of our ongoing plans to bring those folks from Quebec on board, so we can truly make the impacts that we need and have the representation and the outcomes that we so collectively desire across the country. So I'm sorry, Steph, you had a great close, but I thought I'd make mention to that to the group as well.
Sure. Well, again, thank you all for coming today, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.